Chapter 4. Friend or Foe. Tally put her trust entirely in the pendant now, following the moon sparks wherever they led. She felt relief in her faith, but wondered what she would do when the light of day came and the pendant's glow was drowned out by the sunlight. She worked her way along the edge of the rocky outcrop, not daring to climb up high, lest she became visible on the skyline. She had no idea of the terrain ahead and went where the pendant guided her. Soon she was dropping downward into woodland again. She felt her chest tighten in resistance, but the pendant glowed with a strong pulse over her heart. Hesitantly, she moved under the dark canopy of trees. The forest felt different this time, more welcoming and organised, but Tally was growing very weary. Her bare feet were bruised and blistered and almost numb from the unaccustomed contact with the cold, stony earth. The usual sounds of a slumbering forest reassured her. The hooting of owls, bats whirring above her head, skittering sounds made by small creatures in the undergrowth. And the trees, she noticed, had a regularity to their spacing, a uniformity to their trunks and the texture of their bark. Before long, she became aware that the gap between the trees around her had widened. She had entered an alleyway, a tree-lined avenue through the forest, broad and well-trodden. But Tally could go no further. Overcome with exhaustion and relief, she sank down between the gnarled roots of a mighty tree that flanked the avenue. She nestled into a heap of dried leaves piled high up by greedy puffs of wind, and sleep overcame her. Her slumber was fitful. Her dreams were a battleground of old world and new, Valerie with branches for arms stomping relentlessly down a never-ending landing towards her, her father calling her name and reaching desperately into the boggart-infested swamp, too afraid to wade in after her gran holding out the pendant, whispering softly, "Follow your heart, my darling girl." But between them was a wall of flames, and round each of their waists the chubby fingers of a troll holding them forever apart. And their hearts were beating in unison, but outside of their chests, high above their bodies, above the flames, high amongst the winking stars. She woke to a distant rhythmic drumming and a confusion of dried leaves and frozen air on her face. The first tinge of apricot light was beginning to thaw the darkness between the arching cathedral-like branches overhead. As the veil of sleep drew back, she listened intently now, fully alert to her surroundings. Hoofbeats on hard earth, a galloping horse. She sprung up to her feet without thought, only desire for help, and leapt into the alleyway. The great black steed saw her too late and reared up in surprise, hoofs and forelegs glancing off Tally's shoulder as it wheeled away from danger. The slender figure atop hung around the horse's neck, hooded head buried in frosty mane, black cape swirling. Tally was knocked off balance and tumbled backwards. She lay winded for a moment, eyes closed, as rider and horse circled chaotically around her. When she opened her eyes and lifted her head, angry eyes were staring back at her from a pretty face, not the knight in shining armour she had expected. Seeing that Tally was clearly alive, the girl gathered her reins, spinning her horse, and with a sharp tap set off at a gallop once more, raven-feathered cloak streaming behind her. Tally dropped her head back onto the frozen earth and felt uncontrollable sadness welling up, and soon she was sobbing with abandon, her whole body shaking. "I give up!" Hot tears wrestled their way down her mud-streaked cheeks as she lay railing at the universe, but there was no one else to listen. The first acorn bounced lightly off her thigh, but the second and the third had better aim and forced stinging on contact. She wailed louder at the injustice of the mighty oak's cruel indifference, on top of her many other woes. Life was so very unfair, and her life in particular. "Shut up!" More acorns rained down. "Shut up, I say!" Tally paused momentarily in her lamentations. The exasperated voice continued. "Shut up! Shut up! Rata asks only for peace at sunrise, a little solitude before the day's dramas begin." The scolding chatter continued, and branches high up shook and rustled as if in annoyance. A talking tree? Why should this surprise her after this night of terrors? Why should anything be a surprise anymore in this topsy-turvy world? "I'm sorry to disturb you," Tally sobbed, but but I'm lost and cold, and I just want to go home." She rolled into a ball and continued sobbing, righteous in her grief and frustration. The leaves continued to rustle and branches to shake above her. "Lost, you say?" The accusatory tone had softened slightly and seemed to be closer. This appeared to be a drama worth starting early for. "Lost and now found? So no need for more tears?" This sounded like the kind of thing Gran would say. The rustling was much closer now, and so was the voice. Fearful that the tree may be bending down to scoop her up, Tally uncurled a little and looked skywards. The oak stood tall and still as ever, but she caught flashes of rusty red between the green leaves. Then she glimpsed, skittering headfirst towards her down the vast trunk, a creature in proportions the size of a small dog, but with long, wispish ears positioned high on a pointed head. From deep sockets, small, black, glistening eyes darted this way and that, in earnest surveillance of everything the creature looked at. A conical, bewhiskered nose was twitching more fervently the closer it got, and protruding from between thin lips were the most extraordinary, long, curved, golden incisors, glinting in the early dawn light. As the creature plunged towards her, its long, thin body straddled the tree trunk in vertical symmetry, sinewy claws gripping the crusty bark, and following in its wake was a magnificent tail like the plume of red smoke. The creature navigated the last few feet of the trunk and tangle of roots with one graceful leap, landing right beside the weeping girl. Tally sat up. "Rata, word-bearer of kings, at your service, Frost Maiden." The creature stood up on its hind legs and bowed deeply, magnificent tail following. "Where is your home?" Tally hastily wiped away her tears and shook melting frost crystals from her bedraggled hair. Was she really awake and talking to some strange life form akin to a giant saber-toothed squirrel? She felt irritated by this unhelpful and unlikely intrusion upon her grief. "Well, if I knew where my home was, I wouldn't be lost, would I?" "This is a matter of semantics, my child." He paused, but as the strange girl child before him issued no further utterance, he continued. "I am sorely in need of repast." The muddy scrap looked blankly at him. "Are you hungry, Frost Maiden?" Tally nodded. "Come." He rose authoritatively and ushered his odd new companion away from the tree-lined avenue and back into the forest. Tally rose to her feet and, after a step or two, hovered reluctantly to leave the alleyway now that she had found it. "But I should follow the road. There was a girl like me on a black horse, but she was in such a hurry." Rata turned and looked up at her with great interest. "A girl? On a black horse, you say? I do not recommend that you travel alone along the forest byways, Frost Maiden. You may find yourself caught up in someone else's chase." He turned and continued at a rapid scamper along the forest floor. It was true, the girl on horseback had not waited, and the prospect of some breakfast did sound so appealing. She stumbled over the bank that edged the alleyway. Tumbling down the other side, she rushed on through the leafy carpet, afraid of losing sight of the russet-red tail as it vanished and reappeared between the towering trees. And Rata's voice drifted back to her on the early morning breeze. "You will soon learn, my child, that it's better to stop searching for the path and instead let the path find you."